Hello, everyone. I'm Anna from the StartSpace team, and we're broadcasting to you live from StartSpace at State Library Victoria in Melbourne at the moment. It is brilliant to be here with you all for our closing session of the first day of the Future Founders Festival 2021. So a fantastic session in conversation for us to close this first day of the festival. Welcome to Grow a Global Brand That People Love with Richard Lee of luggage brand July and co-founder of the furniture brand Brosa. And this session will be moderated by Rohit Bhargava, founder and host of that Startup Playbook Podcast. So it is fantastic to have both Richard and Rohit with us today. This session is presented as part of the Future Founders Festival 2021 in partnership with Study Melbourne and StartSpace, powered by State Library Victoria. So just a little bit of housekeeping before I hand over to the team. If you want to interact and add some comments, you can use that in the conversation chat box. You can also react to the event using the little emoji bar along the bottom of the live stream. And I've really enjoyed over the course of today watching all those reactions coming in to the different advice and tips that you've been getting from from the speakers in the festival so far. You can use our festival hashtag, hashtag FFP21 to share with us out there on social media. And I'll be back at the end of the session to give you a little bit more of the highlights for what we're expecting for day 2 of the festival tomorrow, plus a few exciting little announcements. So once again, thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoy this session, and I'd now like to hand over to Rohit to kick us off. Rohit, welcome.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you so much for the warm welcome. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us for the last session of the day as well. As Anna mentioned, I'm Rohit. I'm the host of the Startup Playbook Podcast, and I am delighted to be talking to Richard Lee today. Richard, for those people that maybe aren't familiar with you or your background with the companies that you founded, do you want to share a little bit about your story?
Sure. Thanks, Rohit. I mean, great to chat to you again. Thanks, Anna. Like what Anna mentioned, I'm a e-commerce entrepreneur based here in Melbourne, Australia. In the past decades, I have been in e-commerce world in Australia and started, the one of the largest D2C furniture startup called Brosa, back in 2013. Also, most recently, I started a direct-to-consumer luggage startup called July Luggage from 2018. Like many of you, I came here as an international student at the age of 16, and I would love to, I'm excited to share my experience of being an international student and how to, all the struggles and exciting moments of starting a business here.
Yeah, Richard, as you mentioned, obviously through this conversation, we'll dive into some of your experiences and lessons with Brosa and July. But going back, obviously we've had sort of conversations before this particular session. One thing that really sort of struck out to me was your own experience before starting these particular companies as well. I think you mentioned that, as you mentioned, you were an international student, but you were really finding it difficult to get a job, and you ended up selling on eBay and becoming one of the biggest sort of sellers there. And that, acted as a conduit to you sort of starting your companies. Do you want to share a little bit about what that sort of experience was like for you in terms of, graduating from uni and trying to figure out what to do next?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I studied Melbourne Uni and Bachelor of Commerce. When I finished uni, the first thing obviously I did, I tidied up my CV and wanted to, get a job. And obviously that's what I wanted to do. That's what my parents wanted me to do as well. And I submitted a couple of CVs, to a few banks I wanted to work at or investment bank I want to work at, but I got no response at all. And at that moment, I just didn't know what to do. The future looked quite miserable. But one day a friend of mine basically said, you know what, why don't you try sell some stuff online? And I had absolutely no experience. She basically showed me how she did it. She put up a couple of products that she sourced from China. And I was like, that's easy enough. I could do that as well. And over time, I learned all the tactics, how to find the best selling products and how to identify, how to identify great sellers and then source them from China and list them on eBay. And very quickly, I became like a pretty big seller for certain categories at the time on eBay. And that's like the early phase of my e-commerce experience.
Yeah, and kind of digging into that a little bit more, again, through one of our previous conversations, we spoke about, oftentimes a lot of people have this impression that, they need a huge amount of money, a huge pool of resources and capital to get started. What did that look like for you in terms of first getting started on eBay? What was the first step in you starting to learn how to sell and start selling things online?
Well, I didn't have money, and I certainly don't believe that you need money to start business. Because a lot of business die not because they don't have money. A lot of business die because they actually have too much money. Because when they have too much money, they don't know how to, how they spend wisely. They'll just, they just like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to spend on this. I'm going to spend that on that. I hire a whole bunch of people. I'm going to blow everything up. And it just, sometimes that's not the best way to start a business. And when you don't have money, you think, the best way to save money, the cheapest way to get things off the ground. And that's what I did. I think my advice to people is that, when you don't have money, you can find ways to, get things around. For example, if you don't have money to buy inventory, can you get a payment term from your supplier? When you don't have money to, when you don't have money to set up an e-commerce store, can you use your credit card, for example? There are always ways around it. So you don't need a lot of capital to start a business.
And you mentioned that, you had the benefit of sort of someone showing you that it was possible to sell things online as well. And, oftentimes everyone speaks about the importance of having mentors and advisors and those sorts of people to help guide the way, people, especially, ideally people that have done it before.
Yeah.
Again, do you have any advice in terms of, for the people that are listening to this particular session, in terms of going out, approaching and finding particular advisors or mentors or people that can help guide them on their journey?
Yeah. When I first started, I had the benefit of someone showing me what to do. But these days, there are actually a lot more people are doing it and or have done it. Sometimes it's very easy to connect with someone on LinkedIn, and it's very easy to send a message and get a person to come out and have a coffee with you. I think in Australia, generally the founders, they're very friendly, and sometimes I do that as well, and people reach out to me and I just give free advice, and or I come out for a coffee, if I think this person's idea is quite interesting. So I think it's sometimes you just need to reach out to someone on LinkedIn, or if there are certain things you can learn from, you can search a lot of things on YouTube or Google these days, or you can watch Shark Tank shows like Shark Tank. You can learn a whole bunch of stuff just by doing research and watching shows yourself. But I think getting mentor is super important if you can, I think.
Absolutely. I think just kind of, again, digging into that a little bit deeper as well, I think it's really important when finding the right mentors is really understanding what it is that you're looking for as well. So trying to find a mentor just because they're, a successful business owner, but if it's not the same industry, if it's not the same type of skill set or type of mentorship that you need, it's not going to be as useful, and you're probably not going to have that same connection as well. Would you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, I think I can agree to a certain degree. At the same time, but business are very similar, even though it's not the industry. Sometimes you can still learn stuff from people from a completely different industry. For example, you still need a right business model. You still need to be in a in a market that in a big market that you operate in. It's hiring people. It's the same process, and managing people, obviously similar. So there are a few things are actually quite similar, when you run business. So if you can't find people in the same industry that talk to you, you can always find people from a different industry. I think there's always the benefit there.
Yeah. And again, digging into one of the things that you just mentioned in terms of, finding particular businesses that have a big enough market size and all of those sort of things as well. I think one of the things that often gets overlooked for, first-time founders is, is this the right business opportunity for you to go after as well? There's really no shortage of ideas out there. As someone who started sort of 2 successful businesses with Brosa and with July, what are things that you look for or things that sort of stood out to you with both of those opportunities that sort of gave you conviction that they were the right things to go after?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question, Rohit, because You don't, sometimes, a lot of people work on certain ideas for 6 months or 12 months, and and by the 12th month they realize, it's a shit idea, or this thing will never take off. For me, before I start a business, I look at a few things. The first one, very, very important to me, is, does this idea excite me? So I think the very first thing is, you need to work in an area that you are super passionate about. Because you're not passionate about the idea, how do you make sure other people are passionate about the same idea? How do you make sure you sell the stuff to the people, to those consumers? I think that's the very, very first thing. So both Brosa and July, we are in completely different category, but those, furniture, disrupting the furniture industry was super exciting to me, and I was super passionate about it. The luggage is the same thing, because luggage is, is to do travel. Travel is, obviously it's something that I'm super passionate about. That's the first thing. And second thing is, I look at the market size. How big is the market size? Because you could be operating in a very niche market, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just very hard to become a big business, especially in Australia, and we only have like 23, 25 million people. It's a relatively small market, and I think number three is that, what are the problem I'm solving? Am I just doing exactly the same thing as everyone else, or am I solving a problem that I think consumers will benefit from it? For furniture business, the Brosa, we wanted to create beautiful furniture for people. We want to be able to deliver beautiful furniture effortlessly, and people can actually buy designer furniture for a fraction of the cost. Basically, disrupting democratize the designer furniture market. From all the way from inspiration to installation. That's the idea behind Brosa. For July, the same thing, because buying a piece of luggage it was never a good experience. It's always the same things, similar colors, and always 40%, 50% off. And we want to change that. And we want to deliver something, at the highest quality possible, at an honest pricing, by going direct to consumer. So there's no middleman. So we think that we're delivering value to your customers. So those top three things are very, very important to me, before I start any business. And number four is, am I the right person to do it? Like, am I the right person to disrupt furniture industry? Am I the right person to disrupt luggage industry? And do I need a co-founder? And those are the very important things to me before I start a business, to make sure, I'm not wasting my time on an idea for 6-12 months.
There's so many different areas that I want to go through with you. But just picking up on the last bit that you mentioned as well, it's very unlikely that I think that last point is actually really, really important as well in terms of, this might be a great business idea within a large market and all those sort of things, but are you actually the right person for this particular opportunity as well? And it's very rare that one person themselves is the right person. It's often a team, especially a team of co-founders that are sort of the initial sort of ignition point. But again, one of the most common reasons for startups failing is co-founder breakup, or those kind of particular dynamics as well. And it's so hard to get that right. Clearly the team that you sort of co-founded with Brosa, I've chatted to Ivan before as well, as well as the team at July is absolutely amazing. How, again, do you have any recommendations for people that are listening to this session in terms of what are the type of people that they should look for in co-founders? How should they go about vetting through that process? What are ways that they can ensure that they're getting the right people on board?
I think it's super important, as probably a lot of people know that, there's an incubator in the US called YC. One of the requirement is that they don't accept sole founders, or basically, one founder companies. It doesn't matter what idea you've got. When Jobbox first started and they wanted to apply, get into YC, and they didn't accept, Jobbox because, it was only one founder. And later he had to find another co-founder to join YC. And for me, it's super important to have a co-founder to be on this journey, because starting a business is tough. It's so hard, and oftentimes it's so super lonely. And you want to have a co-founder to push you, to encourage you when you're down, and you do the same thing, for to the co-founder. And I think it's important to to have the right co-founder, because you spend more time with your co-founder than your partner sometimes, which it's actually more important. It's very important to find the right co-founder. So how do I make sure I find the right co-founder? I think first thing first is I want to make sure that we our skill set complement each other, not the same thing. For example, my strength is always in supply chain, product development, products. I don't want another co-founder that do exactly the same thing as what I do. I want to make sure the co-founder look after areas that I'm not super strong with. For example, if look at July as example, I look after products, I look after supply chain, and the business side of things, and my co-founder look after marketing and PR, which is super important to build in building a brand. And how do you find these other people? It's there's no golden rule how you find those people. It could be from networking, social networking. It could be your relative. It could be it could be people you just meet on the street. It could be it could be anyway. But the thing you need to make sure is that skill set, you have to complement each other, and personality, you have to be able to you have to be able to kind of like get along really well. Again, you just spend more time with your co-founder than your partner, so you want to make sure of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that one of the ways that a lot of people, especially if they don't have a group of friends that are, let's say, software engineers, for example, they'll go to networking events, and more often than not, the first person that says yes to their idea who has some form of technical skills will bring them on board as co-founders, which again, as you mentioned, is probably not the right way to kind of bring someone on. Because it is such a long journey as well. Are there particular things that you look for in terms of co-founders or when you're hiring people to ensure that there's that sort of long-term alignment with you, not just in terms of skills, but either culturally or kind of ensuring that you're essentially complementing each other and bringing the right people on board?
Yeah, just on this topic, I think it's important. I think for us, very important, we always hire for culture, not for skill, because skill can be acquired. So we always look for people that will fit into our culture very, very well. Either that's, it doesn't matter if that's a co-founder or that's our employees. It's just important to make sure that culturally will fit. So those are the things that we look at, when I look at co-founder or employees, for sure.
And I guess we should come around to the topic of this particular session, which is building, global brands that people love as well. Well, one of the things that you mentioned earlier, which I think is a point for every startup that's launching in Australia, is Australia is a relatively small market when you kind of look at it from a global context. When you consider both Brosa and July's journey, when did you think about sort of expanding overseas? And when we talk about, this is a two-part question. I love two-part questions, but the second part of the question is, when we talk about building products that people love, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll answer the first part of the question. When we use July's example, when we started business, we always had, we always wanted to think global, think international. We never wanted to restrict ourselves in just being in Australia, especially being a travel brand, because you don't want to be, just like yourself, you don't want to just travel to Australia. You want to be able to travel around the world, and we want to be part of that journey as well. So before we started, we always wanted to become an international brand. But you need to be ready when you expand out. So we expanded to China. We expanded to China last year when we were in the middle of the pandemic and in lockdown. And we knew that it was important to expand to another country that probably, have COVID control relatively better at that time. And we made the right decision. And we decided, let's launch in China. And so we can make sales, when we lost majority of our sales here in Australia. And so that was the right strategy for us at the time. So when we build an international brand that people love, I think very important. What I mean to me,
I think to me is that you need to build starting from product, you want to make sure that the product that you are developing is highest quality possible. You're going to reach a wide audience that people love. Doesn't matter if it's West or East, Australia or US or China. We wanted to make sure of that. So that involves in a lot of market research, review, feedback, a lot of that. And secondly, very important is that if you have a great product, you don't have good service, that doesn't mean you have a brand that people love. So we always want to make sure that we have highest service possible for our products. For example, we offer 100-day return policy to our customers here, and also lifetime warranty, because we're so confident with the quality of the products. So it doesn't matter where you travel. If a wheel really comes off, we'll look after you. If you're in France, we'll send you a new case in France. That's the level of commitment that we have. I think that made us, more lovable, to our customers.
Sure. And in terms of building up that sort of customer obsession as well, how do you sort of instill that within your team and within your culture internally? So obviously, you've touched on a couple of policies that you have from a customer facing perspective. How do you instill that across the rest of the team as you sort of continue to grow and scale?
Yeah, I think this is a top-down and top-down approach. So when the management team like so obsessed with customer, and it's just part of the culture, and everyone just follow the same the same like customer experience obsession. So everyone in the business want to look after the customers. Everyone want to make the customer happy, and we on a daily basis we'll look at the customer review. If customer give us any feedback on the products, and our product design team will proactively think whether that's a valid point. If that is, we'll make sure that in V2, V3 we'll make those changes when we manufacture those products. The same thing with our web experience. If people say, hey, this experience is shit, or that one does not make sense, we very quickly loop that back to our tech team, and they will be able to make those changes for our customers. So I think from my perspective, it's a very, very much in the culture, and it's always top down. If the management team doesn't care, like nobody cares in the business. Yeah,
that's a really good point. And I guess, in summary, it's not just about kind of doing one thing. It really needs to be across every single part of the business.
It has to be every touch point of consumer journey, and every touch point, every point in the organization. If you our company, we have offline stores, we have pop-ups, we have online store, we have HQ, and people actually can come to our HQ in Collingwood to purchase a piece of luggage. We want to make sure that customer have the same level of experience, the same level of love from the brand.
And, I think most people, when they think about startups in particular, a lot of people are attracted to investment in general. And obviously I know Brosa has raised money sort of early on from Airtree, which is one of the leading funds over here. July as well, I believe, raised about 10 mil in funding as well.
Yeah.
Again, for the benefit of the listeners, do you want to talk a little bit about your sort of fundraising journey, and specifically what that process was like, when you decided to fundraise, and what getting investors onto the businesses has meant for you in terms of what's changed before and after receiving funding?
Yeah, absolutely. I think very, very important before you take on any investment, you want to ask yourself, are you ready? Because are you ready is a big question. Is the business model ready? Is the right, do you have the right team to execute? And, are you ready on take on, extra board member or directors to the business? Those are the questions you need to ask yourself before you take on any investment, I think. So for me, it was apparent when the business was growing super fast at a very fast rate. Sometimes we were doing 30-40% month by month growth. We knew that we needed additional capital to fuel that growth and help us expand to areas that we wouldn't be able to without additional capital. My experience with investors is that my experience so far has been really positive. All the investors, whether in Brosa or or July, because those investors, it's not like just money investors. Sometimes they are industry partners, and sometimes they are they are just really good operators who have done it before, who were founders themselves. They actually help a lot, bring us a lot of financial discipline, operational discipline, to the business, that helps us become better founders, better management, and better business. So my overall experience so far has been fantastic. But I think getting investment is not for everybody. Again, you need to ask yourself if you're ready, because when you take investment, you always want to make sure that this is a business, this is an idea that you want to work on for the next 5 to 10 years minimum. Because if you only want to work on this for the next 1 year, or you want to work on this part-time, I don't think it's right to take on someone else's money and without putting 100% of yourself in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, to your point in terms of are you ready, as well as there can be this misconception that, just because you have an idea, you'll go to an investor and they'll give you money to build the actual product. Yeah. But, as you mentioned, you were already growing at sort of 30 to 40%. And what you were really looking to do was put fuel on the fire to help you grow faster, which is exactly what investors are looking for. Correct.
I mean, they are... there are businesses like when they only just have an idea, they can get investment from angel investors, putting, a couple $100,000 or $500,000 to kickstart the idea. That's definitely another option. But, I think it's important that, it's important to, I think that's a really good approach as well, if you can get that kind of investment. But there are many things to know, like, for example, are you giving out too much equity, or are you taking on money too early, or have you validated the idea? There are many things to consider before you take on investment.
Yeah. And, oftentimes a lot of these conversations can be, how do I make myself attractive to investors, and how do I make sure that I get those deals? But, I think the way that you phrase this is exactly right as well, in terms of, are you yourself ready, but also are they the right sort of long-term partners for you?
Correct.
Do you want to share a little bit in terms of, what did that process look like for you in deciding with the investors that you did decide to go with? What were the things that you were looking for to make sure that they were the right partners to bring on, that provided not just a capital, but, additional sort of value add above and beyond that?
Yeah. Sometimes, like when you fundraise, the investors will do a lot of due diligence on your business, on the founders and everything. I think the founders need to do the same on the investors. So very often what we look at is that, okay, what were the investments that these guys have done in the past? Let's talk to the founders of those businesses and see, what help or what assistance these guys got from these investors. And that's very, very important. Another thing we look at is that what is the maturity of the fund? If the fund is like 3 to 4 years, I don't know if that's for, it may be right for certain people, but it's not right for others, because that means in 3 or 4 years, these guys are going to exit. They have to exit somehow. So you need to make sure that these guys share the same longer term view as you. And those are the things I look at. I think it's like the conclusion is that you need to do a lot of due diligence yourself to make sure these are the right partners that will be on this journey for the long term, not just a short term, to flip the investments. They're putting 100 and they got like 200,000 after like 6 months or 12 months. Those are not the investors you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of that due diligence process, that's something that gets spoken about a lot on my podcast as well, both from the founder and investor perspective, is, making sure that you, as you mentioned, go and talk to the portfolios of the portfolio founders that those investors have invested in, to not just ask, what is it like to work with them on a day-to-day basis, but what happens when things aren't quite going right? How are they able to support you, and what is that relationship like when things do get tough? Because, if you are going to build a long-term relationship with them, you're going to be working with them over the next 5 to 10 years. You want to make sure that you're getting the right people on board in the good times and the bad.
Exactly. Just to add on your point, like when business is growing fast, growing well, everyone's happy. The founder, the team are happy, the investors are happy. What about in tough situations like COVID? Are these investors gonna help, or do they have the patience to help? Those are the questions that you need to ask yourself by doing your own due diligence on these investors.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, very conscious of July being a luggage company, being in the travel space. COVID must have been sort of particularly hard for you as well, both from a revenue perspective, but also just, the kind of ongoing sort of effects of that. What has that been like? What's kind of the other side of having to go through this external force that has a challenging impact on your business?
Well, I think the very first thing is I'm very super proud to say that during this tough period, we never let any single person, single employee, leave. So that I think I'm super proud of that. The team has done a fantastic job during this process. I think we just like, we can't be happier. From a business perspective, we definitely took a hit on the revenue last year, especially last year when we had hard lockdown and travel restrictions and all that. And consumers just had no idea what's going to happen when this can end. So it was tough, but luckily, I think that was the benefit of raising external capital. Luckily, we raised a round last year that really helped us, extend the run rate, with the business. And from this year, things actually change a lot. I think it's because people know what to expect. And people understand it's not going to be long term, and people know that vaccine is out. And as long as everyone get vaccinated, and we're gonna be able to travel, we're gonna be able to to go to another country again. So our sales actually really come back and actually very, very strong. We pretty much achieved the pre-COVID level and growing as well. And just earlier this month, we decided to expand our business to the US. It's where I think 60% of vaccination rate and people traveling. Domestically, people traveling into Europe, its economy really bounced back. So we've seen a lot of traction in the US, and it's just been absolutely amazing. So for us, overall, I think last year was tough, but luckily we got capital, and the team has done a fantastic job, pushing out more products and doing more campaigns. And this year, all the preparation work that we did last year. Now it's all like coming out and showing great results.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming kind of full circle to what we kind of spoke about a little bit earlier as well, the importance of, does this particular idea or business excite you? It's much harder to keep a business going if through difficult periods like COVID, when there's so much uncertainty and all those sort of things, if the business itself doesn't excite you and it isn't what you want to be doing for the next sort of 5 to 10 years of your life as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So Richard, I feel like we could talk all day, but I am mindful of time, and I just wanted to make sure that, as kind of a parting gift, just to make sure that we kind of leave with some practical advice as well for the people listening. You've had the amazing experience of kind of launching 2 successful businesses. As you mentioned, even though the businesses are in particularly different industries, there are often commonalities between successful businesses in particular. What are the things that you think have made both Brosa and July successful?
I think business model, total addressing markets, and the team. I think those are very, very important thing to me. Is this the right business model? I think D2C, direct to consumer, is the right model. Basically, we're disrupting the traditional distribution model. By cutting out all the middlemen. We pass on all the savings to our end consumers. Is the total addressing market large enough for us to be in? I think both are super big. One is home living, another one is travel. They're super big, industries to be in. And do we have the right team, the right founders to execute on the ideas? And I believe that I have both. I have the luck to have both, in both businesses, which is super, super important. And I think on top of that, I think as a piece of advice to a lot of listeners, I believe a lot of you guys are actually international students, just like me. When I first came here when I was 16, I think, we have our own struggles. It's very hard for international students to start a business. I think what you should do is you should turn your disadvantages into your advantages. My disadvantage when I first came here was that I didn't speak much English. My English was really shit. But at the same time, I knew my advantage. My advantage was I was able to, I'm able to speak Chinese. I understand both cultures. And I use that. I take advantage of that. So I was able to, do business in China, source products from China and sell in Australia, or export Australian products to China. And so I think that's the very, very important thing. You need to realize that sometimes you can turn your disadvantage into advantage and to build a successful business.
Fantastic. That was actually going to be my last question in terms of your parting advice. But Richard, thanks so much. I think those are some absolutely fantastic insights, and hope that everyone listening got some value out of that. Once again, thank you to the StartSpace team for having both Richard and I involved. And I will now hand over back to Anna to wrap up.
Thanks,
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rohit, for asking those perceptive questions to be able to draw out some of that detail. I really enjoyed that conversation about how you find and target and build that relationship with your co-founder, because that is so critical to business success. And Richard, thank you so much for your generosity in sharing those advice and those tips and that practical advice towards the end there for all our future founders that are listening today, but particularly for those international students, of whom many are in the audience. I know we'll take inspiration and heart from that. So thank you very much to you both. It was absolutely wonderful to have you. Thank you for being part of the Future Founders Festival.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll say goodbye now to Richard and to Rohit. And now we will say goodbye to the end of day one of the Future Founders Festival. It has been an absolute pleasure having these speakers with us here today. And we have more tomorrow. So just a few highlights of what is coming up in the program for tomorrow. We have Jill Tang from Ladies Who Tech giving one of our earlier in the day keynote presentations. Around lunchtime, we'll be talking empowered communities with the Study Melbourne team, who have so many programs of support on this year in particular for international students. So do tune in to that one. And then we'll be closing out tomorrow with a cracking keynote from Winitha Bonney. So please do tune in for that. We also have our pitch competition sponsored by our friends at Practera, and some bonus networking with confidence hackers at the end of the day. So you can try out some of the tips maybe that you picked up from earlier on today. In the meantime, come along and check out the StartSpace community online at startspacehq.com. You can join up as a free member and get support all year round. And we'll start to look ahead tomorrow as well to other parts of the Future Founders program in association with Study Melbourne. We've got a hackathon at the end of August. We've got a boot camp program where we will hothouse you through a couple of weeks of practical business training here at the StartSpace Loft. And then towards the end of the year, we'll be launching our venture scholarships with funded seed funding for international student ventures to come and get their business idea off the ground. So there's a lot happening in the Future Founders program. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow for day 2 of the festival. In the meantime, enjoy the networking online digital hub that will stay open overnight. And we will see you tomorrow. Good night.